I call this meeting to order. Ms. Gresham, everyone a minute to sign in. But Ms. Humphries, will you start us off with the roll call?
President Osborne,
I am here.
Vice President Holcomb,
Here.
Member Gresham,
Here.
Member Causey,
Here.
Member Spear,
Here.
all are present.
All right, and I will have Dr. Guerin lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda, please?
So moved. Second.
All right, Ms. Spear with the motion, Ms. Causey with the second. Please vote. The motion has been adopted and the agenda has been set. All right, are there any calls for executive session? Seeing none, we move on to item 3.1, Superintendent's Report. Dr. Guerin, what do you have to report?
President Osborne, members of the governing board, cabinet, and guests, we are in week 2 of the 2022-23 school year, and our opening was described by many as the most normal in years, and that's exactly what we want for our students, families, and staff. It was great to see parents and back on campus again. Our mission statement is to foster success for all students through dynamic learning experiences, focusing on students' academic, social, and emotional growth. And the word all is so important as we individualize instruction to ensure every student receives the support they need and a stellar education. We know that COVID has been extremely disruptive, so we are focusing on each child, making sure that as educators, we work hand in hand with their families to meet the needs to provide the best instruction for every student. I want to talk a little bit about safety. Safety is a concern on the minds of many. Please know that Madison has conducted a facilities security assessment, which includes physical security of the buildings, and it also includes our emergency practice management. So in response to this assessment, we have continued to make improvements. You may notice some of these improvements, such as office remodels, an increased focus on a secure point of entry on campus. So parents, if you're used to going into the back door just during the school day, you're going to be asked to check in through the office. We have a new Raptor system where we have everyone badged as they walk in. Those are just some of the things that we're working on. So please know that security is so important to us, and we're focusing on it in accordance with our plan. Parents may notice an increase in the number of parent permission slips going home for things like student surveys. So we really appreciate you filling those out. We are committed to transparency at Madison, and parent voice is so important to us. So we're going to be going above and beyond, moving forward what is required by us by statute to make sure that parents feel included and understand what the work we're doing with students are. Lastly, an enrollment update after our 10th day of school, which was Monday. Our district enrollment is at 5,583 students for kindergarten through 8th grade. We are hearing from principals that there is a lot going around, not just COVID, and students are trickling in daily. That is a decrease of 18 students from the last day of school from last year. With preschool, our district enrollment is 5,908 students. So I will provide these numbers to you specifically in a board update, and that's all I have tonight.
Okay, now on to board member reports. Mr. Holcomb, you want to start us off?
Yeah. First off, it's great to have a normal start That's become abnormal in these days, and that's great to hear. I wanted to congratulate Dr. Guerin on I took the time to watch the interview or listen with KJAZ, and that was very well done. And so it was a good introduction to the community of you being the new superintendent, and you did a very nice job answering the questions. The other thing I wanted to report back is, as a member of the board of the Madison Education Foundation, we had a whole afternoon workshop. Ms. Garvey was there, as other members of the board. I think it was hugely productive, laying out the year and working towards getting that organization back up and fully functioning, having a gala, some community events, even talking about starting up the tasting tours again, because we had a number of people who missed those. So it was very good to have that. I think there's new energy in that and going forward. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Great. This question.
Thank you. I don't really have anything, but fall sports are starting up right now, so I will be coaching again. So if your student is interested in any fall sports, make sure to look for that.
So we should be expecting championships on the Gresham leadership.
Absolutely.
Ms. Spear.
I have nothing to report.
Ms. Kazi.
I was able to attend a meeting today where that is seeking some input from board members, school board members, legislators regarding a portal that provide information to the public, to parents, to school board members, to legislators regarding spending and funding per school and per district. And so I encourage my fellow board members, if you get the invitation to participate, I think we were all invited, that you do attend to provide your feedback. I think that the voices of board members was very valuable, and I encourage them, as I mentioned to Ms. Garvey, that they, in the next stage, they incorporate some voices from the experts in the field that we have here in all our districts. Thank you.
Ms. Spear.
Ms. Kazi, is that from A for Arizona?
Yes, that's the one.
Thank you.
All righty. Just one little small thing to report. I had a great interaction in my professional life with a gentleman named David Richardson, and he happens to be running for office. But the interesting part about the story is running in Chandler. He said that the Madison Meadows School saved his life and his career. And it was just, he was having a hard time in Washington. His parents transferred him, and he went on to ASU with a biology degree, and now he's looking to be in public service. And I just thought that was, like, to have someone say, a school saved the direction of my life was just very nice. And he's a youngster, he's only 31, so I was trying to figure out, maybe I was on the board. But no, he was a little earlier, so Mr. Holcomb was probably here, so he could probably take credit. But yeah, just, those are the little things that go around in life, and he also puts it on his campaign website. So he's promoting our district. So he buttered me up pretty good. So with that, I will move on to item 6.1, information items. Student services update. Dr. Guerin, do you want to introduce this item? Oh, did I miss consent? I'm sorry, I jumped right over consent. Let me move back to item. I'm just a mess today. Ms. Humphries, we do not have any calls to the public?
We have no calls to public.
All right, now on to item 5.0. That's what happens when you scroll the little screen down and you're like, oh, that's the next item. Item 5.0, consent items. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
And Ms. Gresham, second. Please vote. It's like a game show. Plug in. And the consent agenda has been approved. Now on to 6.1, student services update.
Thank you, President Osborne, governing board members, cabinet, and guests. Ms. Marshall, Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services, and her team will provide an overview of the student support services aligned with Strategic Plan Goal Area 2, Inclusivity and Wellness. Ms. Marshall.
Thank you. Good evening, President Osborne, members of the board, and members of cabinet. I don't know what gave us the foresight in 2018-19 to restructure educational services to include a student services department, but the past 2.5 years showed us that that was really a much needed change. So we have incorporated special education under the umbrella of student services, but have been really able to expand the services and supports that we provide for students. So tonight, Edie Dolan, our Director for Student Services, along with a few members from her team, will present some of those supports that we have.
Welcome.
Thank you very much, Dr. Osborne, members of the governing board, Dr. Guerin, cabinet, and guests. We're very, very excited to share some updates about student services. I'm joined by my teammates Jackie Pierce and Hugo Estrada, and we're eager to begin. So taking a look, as Ms. Marshall shared, all of the work that we're doing is aligned with our district strategic plan. So really thinking about how are we ensuring that we're supporting the emotional and physical well-being of all of our students. Tonight, we're specifically going to speak towards commitments 2.1, 2.2, and 2.3, really thinking about how we're creating social and emotional learning opportunities throughout the day, how are we implementing trauma-informed practices, and also thinking about that climate of physical and emotional safety that we want folks to feel when they walk into any of our schools.
And in addition to aligning to our district strategic plan, we are also aligning our work to the Arizona SEL competencies that were adopted in 2020 by the State Board of Education. And so we really believe that it's important that all of our work aligns together to provide the best support for our students. And what we're doing is creating a safe and supportive, respectful classroom environment for our students and for our staff as well.
So taking a look, this is one of my favorite triangles ever. It's the continuum of services. So thinking about MTSS, the idea of multi-tiered systems of support, what I would like to draw your attention to is this idea, tier 1 is thinking about supports for all of our students. So what are we doing for every single student in our building? Tier 1 supports will be enough for 80 to 85 of students to make sufficient progress. But then what you'll notice is this is a layered triangle. So above that, you'll see tier 2, and the idea is some students are going to require an additional layer of support, but the emphasis is an additional layer. So we're going to continue to provide that tier 1 support as well as tier 2, and then 1 to 5% of students will require intensive individualized supports. So the analogy that I love to use, and it's a little bit overused, but I'm going to go for it, is the idea of going to a dentist. So thinking about tier 1 is this idea of brushing your teeth. For 80 to 85% of people, if you brush your teeth very well and floss, that'll be enough to prevent cavities. However, even for folks that brush their teeth well, there's about 15% of folks that are going to get cavities. That would be a tier 2 supportive visit to a dentist they're going to address. Tier 3, thankfully I'm not there yet, but the unlucky ones that are going to need a root canal. So even though you have the tier 1 support, even though you have the tier 2 support, you're still going to need that additional layer of intervention. And the really big takeaway for this is you don't stop brushing your teeth, right? And so likewise, we don't stop providing supports for all of our students, even as we add additional layers of support. So this is a slide about DESA. So DESA is our universal social emotional universal social emotional screener. And the reason that we chose this is that DESA is unique in that it's strengths-based. So it doesn't just tell you an area of growth for a student, it also lets us know what our students are doing well. We think that's so important to recognize that. It's also CASEL aligned, so all of 8 competencies addressed by DESA match the Arizona SEL standards that are 5 CASEL aligned competencies. So if you take a look at this, I found this that's very, very encouraging. What you're seeing is from last spring, and it's the DESA across the district. So the DESA Mini is an 8-question survey completed by teachers, and what you'll notice is the overwhelming majority of students fall in the strength or typical range. So I think coming out of years of a pandemic and thinking about really the dire strait of youth mental health and needs, this is very encouraging that in Madison, most of our students with just Tier 1 supports are really making adequate progress. I think it's also important to look at the green because it's showing that 40% plus in most of our grades of students have strengths. So thinking about how we're leveraging those strengths in classrooms is something we're also thinking about. And then at the bottom, you'll see in the red is just the idea of these are skills that 8% of students, let's say in kindergarten, would require additional layers of support to work on.
So can I just go back to the last,
Absolutely.
the root canal slide, because that scares me.
This one.
Walk me through what we're measuring and how that works, so that we're talking about skills, or we're talking about emotional health. What are we measuring?
Absolutely. I have a slide for that. So these are the 8 different competencies that we are taking a look at. And if you look at these 8 different competencies, these are really skills. These are skills that students need in order to be successful in school, but also thinking about college and career readiness skills in order to have positive life outcomes. And if you look at these 8 different DESA competencies, they actually match the 5 CASEL competencies that Arizona has adopted for the SEL standards. So you'll see in the center, social emotional learning, those 5 competencies there: social awareness, relationship skills, self-awareness, self-management, and responsible decision-making. Those are the competencies adopted by our state. Those actually match the 8 competencies that DESA measures.
Okay. Just one follow-up question.
Sure.
As kind of leading on to Dr. Guerin's earlier comment, parents are free to view the survey, look at it, test it, or, have some access to it if they're interested in how their students are doing.
Yes, absolutely. So we are in the process. We just got permission. We will be posting the survey. It's an 8-question mini screener, so families can absolutely access that. Families can also opt out should they choose to.
Great. Go ahead, please.
Any other questions about DESA?
We could take questions from the public. So, if you'll write it on the card, then hand it to me, and I will write your question on the card, give it to Danielle, and then one of us will ask the question, just to facilitate. Yes. That's the call to the public card. So we will get your questions answered. Since we normally don't do that, but it's an informal environment, so Ms. Kazi and...
As I look at this, I'm struck by the book, All I Really Need to Learn, I Learned in Kindergarten. And it seems to me that the pandemic, if it taught us anything, it's that if we don't have those soft or social emotional skills developed, such as listening, knowing not to hit the person next to you, the self-control, it's really impossible to learn those hard skills of math. So I'm curious, and I'm sure you might have a slide for this, but it'd be really helpful to see then the connections between strong, because we know intuitively, but I think sometimes for families to understand, this needs to happen before your kid can really learn. And if this is lacking, not only is that child probably being disruptive in the classroom and hindering the ability of other students to learn, they're obviously having trouble learning themselves. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thank you for pointing out that connection between access to learning, absolutely. And also when we're thinking about access to safe spaces, these skills are needed in order to have safe schools and reduce conflict in other areas. It's not just our belief, it's backed up by CASEL, which again goes back to the Arizona SEL standards, and also thinking about our district strategic plan about providing those opportunities to students throughout the day. That's not all we're doing.
So an additional opportunity that we have throughout the day for our students is our ruler framework. And so ruler is our framework that our schools are utilizing to teach emotional intelligence. And so we really want for our students to feel like they can communicate what they're feeling and how they want to feel in that space together. And so one of the things that we have implemented is that each site will have a site implementation team. And that team includes an administrator, social worker, counselor, and a teacher to talk about how the ruler framework will be implemented at their site. They talk about what will that look like with family engagement, what will that look like for our students, and really providing some additional coaching and instructional support to ensure that our students can engage into the ruler framework as best as they can. In addition, we have mood meters widely across our campuses. So we have them in English and in Spanish so that our students can really connect with how they're feeling and not just, oh, well, I'm feeling red today, but having the specific language to be able to say, I'm feeling really passionate about math right now. I'm in the red quadrant. I have high energy and high pleasantness. And so our social workers, counselors, teachers, our staff members, everyone is taking a role in providing that instruction to our students. And last year, all of our staff were able to participate in learning those skills so that they felt comfortable to teach that to our students. In addition to mood meters, we have curriculum night presentations that we have shared with the sites so that they can then continue to have that family engagement and let our families know what is in our curriculum, how are we teaching these skills, how can you build upon these skills with your family, and we really want to be able to support that family inclusion as well. There's additional coaching with myself as a SEAL coordinator, and our Ruler Institute is also supporting our campuses as well. And then all of our new returning staff, new teachers, they were provided with the training as well. And so this year, our goal is to utilize the charter and the mood meter, and we're going to support our campuses in the best way that we know how to be able to ensure that they are developing their social and emotional academic abilities.
Mr. President.
Falcon,
can I-
please.
Yeah, because we've talked about ruler and that before, and it's always felt that we haven't gotten to full implementation. It sounds like what you're describing now is we've hit that point of full implementation, so hopefully not only will the program be successful, but we should be able to measure it now too, because we're all in.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we are utilizing this year during our site visits is we're going in classrooms and we're helping and we're supporting. And what we've seen so far, our kids are putting how they're feeling on their mood meter. In our leadership meetings, we're using the tools as well. And so we're creating charters and collective agreements about how we want to feel in this space, how we're going to resolve conflict so that we can still also support our students as well.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Hugo Estrada. I'm the Behavior Intervention Specialist for the district. I'm here to talk to you about a couple of different programs and initiatives that I'm spearheading this year in relation to PBIS, in relation to crisis response, and just behavior management support for teachers, which has been an area of need that has been discussed in the past. So first of all, in speaking to PBIS and behavior management support, COI, who provided us with some specific PBIS training over the summer and has been a point of contact for PBIS for the past couple of years, came and stopped by in the spring semester and did an assessment over some of the trends that we were experiencing in the district. And some of the district-wide trends ended up being establishing a pattern through some of the schools that we saw. So one of the big ones was a perceived lack of recent district support. In the past, and really for the most part pre-pandemic, there was a strong district team that implemented PBIS and provided support to the different sites regarding PBIS. That kind of fell by the wayside as people kind of struggled to just make it through the day with COVID pandemics, all of the changing landscapes through that hard time. But one of the things that was really being requested was some type of district leadership when it comes to implementing rolling PBIS, providing coaching, providing some kind of leadership from a district perspective. Another one would be the reward and recognition systems. So having a system in place to recognize and incentivize not only students to make those positive, demonstrate those positive behaviors on campus, but also to recognize and reward staff that are implementing those behaviors that we want to see. Another area of concern was the teaching of school-wide expectations. PBIS has a system set up where you are constantly recognizing what those expectations should be, you are making those changes based off data, and you are actively teaching what those expectations should be. So it's not something that first week of school you're gonna present the expectations to your class during first period, and then you're not gonna revisit them for the rest of the year. We wanna make sure that stakeholders, and that includes staff, that includes the community, that includes other partners, have the opportunity to give their voice to what those expectations are, but then we're revisiting them throughout the year and making changes as needed. And then consistent proactive reinforcement, we are providing that reinforcement when it's needed. We're refining those best practices and those strategies for positive behavior at all of our different sites. Jacqueline, Edie, and myself are going to be providing that internal coaching, development, and refinement. We want to make sure that sites feel supported because that has been an area of concern for so long. So we're happy to be able to spearhead that for this coming year and beyond. As far as my position as behavior interventionist, we are looking at targeted support. As Edie mentioned, multi-tiered systems of support. We have that amazing triangle, and 80% of that bottom universal strategies are going to work for 80% of our students, but there are students that are going to require that additional tier 2 and tier 3 support. We want to be targeted with the support that we're implementing. We want to make sure that we are using all of the resources that we can to the best of our ability to support our students. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel, and that's something that I'm very excited to be able to provide support to students and teachers that are going to need that support with tier 2 and tier 3. As far as PBIS with Madison specifically, we are aligning it with the district-wide plan. With the information that we gained from the evaluations that were done in the spring, we came up with essentially dividing and conquering. We came up with 3 cohorts in order to make sure that we are being as targeted as we can in providing support to the different campuses. Cohort number 1 and 2, their focus is really going to be on setting up those site-based PBIS teams. Jacqueline, Edie, and myself are providing the district-level support, but we really want to make sure that sites have the ability to work independently and work at their sites, because really they're the ones that, the site-based teams are the ones that know what's going on campus. They know what the needs are for their students. They know what the needs are for their staff. And as a result, we want to empower sites to be able to handle those, make those decisions with expectations, with all of those things. Teaching expectations, there is a lot of good work. I've been having some amazing conversations with site admins, with teachers, with members of the PBIS teams who have already had their meetings, and they are digging through their Google files, they're going through their folders, they're finding all of this content that was established pre-pandemic, and now it's just a matter of searching for those jewels, making sure that we get all of that good information. And one of the things that I'm excited about in this role as a coach and as a leader from the district perspective is taking those best practices from different sites and giving them to other sites. So giving sites an opportunity to collaborate and work together, because something that might be working at one elementary school could be very beneficial for another one. Cohort number 3, they're the ones that are a little bit further along, but they are still going to need some coaching and training when it comes to teaming. We, again, really want to emphasize that the PBIS team at each site has that capacity to be able to handle things internally before things escalate to requesting support from a district level. But they are the ones that are also going to receive additional training and support with that data-driven decision component, which is really key. We want to make sure that whatever the support that each site is handling is handled with precision, right? We're not just reinventing the wheel. We're not just throwing out different strategies, throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. We want to make sure that whatever support we're promising and providing to teachers and students is, we're going to get the most bang for our buck. External supports, again, Jacqueline, Edie, and myself, we are taking on the role of district coaches. We're providing that training. We're providing that collaboration, that mentoring. And if we really just kind of want to put this in a nutshell, for PBIS at Madison, we really are focusing on rebooting what PBIS is. We're getting rid of all of those stereotypes or all of those things that people think are PBIS and making sure that we're coming up with a clear, concise definition. We're refreshing it for the sites that had it in place already, and we're refining it so that we can have best practices moving forward. And then lastly, I am also in charge of making sure that we are implementing crisis prevention intervention with facilitation from the Crisis Prevention Institute. This is something that is very near and dear to me because I was a special education teacher for the last 5 years. I've worked I worked in the emotional disabilities campus over at Madison Meadows. I was a paraprofessional at a couple of different schools at Madison before, and one of the things that we were really trained in early was crisis prevention, intervention, how to respond to students in crisis. So for as long as I can remember, for the last 12 years in education that I've been working with special needs students, I've received training in CPI as a way to really just kind of hone in what their core principles and their guiding philosophy of care, welfare, safety, and security. Through this training, we identify and respond to crisis behaviors. So we have different presentations and we have different workshops and different conversations as to what is crisis behavior. How do you know when a student is in crisis? Teaching what those safety interventions are, making sure that we're approaching a situation from the best interest of the student and the safety of all the individuals involved, making sure that we're making positive decisions and assessing what that risk behavior is. We teach with CPI, and I was able to get certified this summer through it, that crisis prevention, intervention, any type of physical management or anything like that only happens as a last resort after all de-escalation avenues have been exhausted. And that's really what the key takeaway is when we're talking about that decision making and when we're doing the training. And lastly, just creating that guidance when reestablishing relationships, individuals in crisis, when they are in post-crisis. That is key. That is a key time when it comes to reestablishing those relationships. And CPI does an excellent job in providing that training. So myself, along with Phil Padilla, are going to be providing training, support, and refinement in CPI to individuals at Madison who require it. Thank you.
And so our last piece that I actually want to share.
Actually, before you start, Ms. Kazi has a question.
Sorry. I'm so sorry.
be sorry.
I'm sorry to interrupt the rhythm of your presentation.
No.
Really have enjoyed it very much so far.
I started it, so.
So we have a lot of new teachers, so I'm just curious, and I don't know if this is a question for Mrs. Webb or for you, but how, PBS is not necessarily done at every school. We have a lot of new teachers where, management of classrooms is not necessarily taught, unfortunately, in college, as I think it should be. How are we managing that? How is that going?
Sure. So I think a big part of our strategy is we really want to empower site-based and school teams in order to have the skills needed. So working as external coaches with internal coaches at all of the sites in order to ensure that they are able to provide that development to their staff. It's really, really important that that's housed internally because they live in that building. They see teachers day in, day out, and they also need, their colleagues. They need to be able to reach out to colleagues for support. We are also available as needed to consult and provide those additional layers of support. And the hope of essentially creating different cohorts was recognizing that different schools need different things. We also recognize within schools, different staff members need different things as well. And that's something we're working with our PBIS teams in order to provide.
So just a follow-up question. So are we giving for our new teachers kind of a standardized training, onboarding, and then provide the support? I think one of the things that as a board we need to start measuring is the impact of turnover all of a sudden spins down to less teachers who are PBIS trained, which turns into harder implementation, which turns into, I think we need to start looking at this more holistically. I mean, I'm very happy that we've gone back and refocused, because I know this was one of the board priorities, is getting a handle on the behavioral issues coming out of COVID, which have been immense, and I'm glad. I think PBIS works.
Sure.
Yeah, so if you can have thoughts on that, or Dr. Guerin or Ms. Marshall. please feel free.
Yes, I can speak to, for new teacher orientation, so all new teachers did receive training on PBIS basics as well as basics around ruler, basics around social emotional learning. So that was part of our new teacher onboarding earlier this year. But absolutely, I can make a note of that to gather some data on that.
Okay.
And Dr. Osborne and members of the board, I will add that through the interest-based negotiations last spring, this reboot and refresh of PBIS was one of the topics that came up. And through the board's support, we were able to provide additional resources for each campus so that as they do this reboot, especially as you noted with the turnover of staff, we can have some release time and coaching time for those school teams to be able to provide that support to the teachers.
And Dr. Osborne, if I can make one more comment, Educational Services has done an outstanding job preparing our new teachers. This is all aligned to the strategic plan. So the strategic plan will be measured periodically. We'll assess our progress. So this is definitely aligned to goal 2. And then paired with that is the retention, recruitment of teachers, which is a concern for all of us. And so we will be able to take those, weave them together to measure and see how the impact is. We also have our instructional coaches, one of which is a designated mentor. So to build that relationship with new teachers is just so important.
Yeah, and I think as we implement the strategic plan, I think one of the things I would like to see is have we changed the behavior pattern over time, but at the same parallel, look at some of the things that may be restricting the ability. And to me, I'm more and more concerned that with all these programs that are robust and that if you bring in a new teacher, they can only handle so much. And so I just want to kind of think more holistically about that. Mr. Holcomb, you look like you had a question.
Yeah, I just did, I've been interested in Ms. Webb about what you're seeing on the campuses. I know it's early, but you've been here for a while and just, how is it different or how is it effective?
She wasn't expecting questions.
I
Yeah, I'm
wasn't
sorry to come
expecting a
out of left
question.
field, but
President Osborne, members of Cabinet, Dr. Guerin, and Cabinet. What we see on campuses is just a variety of behavior when kids first come to school. What we do with new teachers is they have the new teacher hire orientation, the onboarding in that arena. And then at the site level, you provide support in layers. You provide support from an admin perspective. You provide support from a team perspective. We rely at my school heavily on the team. We have a pretty robust PBIS committee on our campus. We talk about, but to be frank, it ends up being on a case-by-case basis, right? You're right, you can be really easily overwhelmed. And so you take it little at a time and you just build those skills with the teacher and you provide help when you need to provide help. So it's a process, but we continually are trying to improve that tool belt for teachers as we go along. And with the help of the district support, I think that will increase our capacity at the site level to really hone in and improve those skills even more.
So before you start your last piece, the question from our guests in the audience, what is DESA and how do they provide support to the district? So can you kind of describe what DESA is and then kind of give us kind of a background and how it provides support?
Sure. So DESA stands for the Devereux Student Strengths Assessment. DESA is a universal social emotional learning screener. So we don't receive any support from DESA directly. It's a tool that we utilize in order to determine which students have which strengths and which students require additional skills needed in order to access their learning environments. DESA does come with resources in terms of there are resources available for Tier 2 and Tier 3 instruction, but we have not begun to use those at this point. But they do offer that. The primary goal for us in utilizing DESA is to understand what's going really well for students, where are they excelling, and where do they need that additional layer of support so we can be strategic about providing any type of intervention.
Okay, and that is the same thing as, you talked about the initial screener, that's the DESA screener, correct?
So DESA has two components.
Okay.
There's the mini DESA, which is an 8-question survey. That's what we've used in Madison. We have not moved to using the full-length DESA. We are still discussing that option at this point. The mini DESA is 8 questions and is available if families are interested in viewing.
Okay, great. Alrighty, please continue.
I promise this is the last one. Okay.
We got a short agenda, and this is interesting, so.
So I want to thank Board Member Grisham. I'm very, very grateful. You alerted us of an amazing opportunity. So this is the Arizona Adverse Childhood Experience Consortium, and this is an incredible opportunity to receive targeted professional development that's in line with our strategic plan 2.3. So thinking about that commitment about trauma-informed and healing-centered practices, this is a great first step. So we are going to be participating in sessions with the AZ ACEs. It's ASBA approved. And we are very, very thankful that we are going to have 2 cohorts, one for elementary schools, one for middle schools. Folks are going to volunteer to participate and will be compensated by the consortium for participating. And really, this is going to help us implement those trauma-informed practices by understanding what that term means, how trauma might impact the brain, and very key things that educators should know when working with students that have experienced adverse childhood experiences. So we're very, very grateful for this opportunity.
And just to be clear, so this is for kids who parent death or some other kind of significant trauma, that we can help them, coach them along to the extent that it makes sense.
Yes, there's many different examples of adverse childhood experiences, and this training is going to go into depth. That is definitely an example of one of exploring what could happen if something truly terrible happens. This is not the day-to-day events of, part of childhood. This is something terrible and unfortunate has occurred, either a one-time incident or something long-standing, such as living in, extreme poverty and being without food or without shelter, and thinking about how that impacts the development of a child. And then for that child to come into school, what skills and what support do we need to provide in order for them to access content?
Yeah, very supportive of that kind of effort. Most of the board knows, my sister passed away and left an infant child and a third grader, and how, Emerson can learn under that environment he's doing great, but, that's a lot to weigh on. And Liam's the actual one in school, but very important.
Yes, absolutely. We're also very glad that they will be training administrators as well. So we will have the 2 cohorts, so one elementary and one middle school cohort, and they will also be working with us at ILT to train all district admins so we can all be as informed as possible, and again, to implement that strategic plan of those trauma-informed practices.
And are we mainly training the social workers, teachers? What's the mix?
So we are leaving it up to volunteers. It has gone out to social workers, counselors. It has also gone out to schools, so teachers might volunteer, paraprofessionals might volunteer. We really want to invite anyone that's interested in learning about this work to really be able to bring this back to their school.
Ms. Spear?
Thank you so much. I also echo my colleagues' support for this. It's something that a lot of our administrators, it's something that we have to be more aware of as we move through times, especially like with COVID. There have been a lot of tragedies over the last few years. And our students, if they're not able to have the supports available to them at school, oftentimes they won't have those supports. Having gone through this myself personally, my husband died 3 years ago. My school-age child was only able to get counseling if I paid cash money for it. Insurance does not cover things like counseling. And so it becomes an equity issue, and it breaks my heart that there are students out there that are going through trauma and who are not able to access the kind of supports that they need so that they can endeavor to reach their full potential. And so I'm really grateful that we have these layers of support, and especially like when you were describing your tier, which, by the way, that's a brilliant description, going to the dentist.
I didn't come up with it. I'd like to take credit, but
well, I'm glad you used it all the same. But having these layers of support is so critical, because the reality is we either do this now for this generation, or we will be paying for them down the line. And I don't mean to sound so crass as to just to water it down to that level, but that they will not be able to reach their full potential as humans, as individuals, as citizens. So I just wanted to say I support this, and I would have been very grateful for this to have been in place when my child was there in Madison. Thank you.
It's a little scary that Scott can't find where the school district is here. Ms. Gresham.
I did actually pull it out in silence today.
Ms. Gresham.
Thank you, sir. Were you finished, Ms. Dolan, or do you have more?
No.
Okay. Well, first, thank you all for being here. It's always great to hear from the people that are actually implementing these. And I'm glad you're able to take advantage of the ACEs, and I encourage many of our counselors and social workers and teachers, as many as possible, to take advantage. It is free. When I saw that, I was like, oh, that's a plus. And I also actually lost my mother when I was in high school, and we did not have any of this social, emotional, anything. I think one teacher asked me to make sure I was still eating or something. That was like the most they reached out to me at that point. So yes, and I want to let our other board members know, I think there's and Ms. Humphreys is looking into it, there's a training for board members as well. So I'm hoping to take advantage of that. And then I had one other comment or question back on the DESA bar graph. And as we all know, middle school is, of course, a hard time. And I did notice that, the bottom got higher as, in middle school. So I guess my question is, are we putting extra supports for those? It was like 6th, 7th, and 8th, I noticed especially. So for our middle schools, are there, extra supports for them, I guess is my question.
Absolutely. So we are actually very fortunate this year. All of our schools have a social worker and or a counselor, or 2 social workers, so have 2 staff members full-time on each campus, which I think is incredible to provide those additional layers of support. And the idea is, based upon the findings of the DESA, we're going to use that to be really targeted in our next steps. So we noticed that as well, and that's going to be factored into determining our next steps for intervention.
Great. Thank you. That's all I have.
Yeah, go ahead. Ms. Kazi.
So I took something that I think ADE offered that was trauma-informed, and they provided a book. Do you know anything about that?
It might be similar, or maybe this is a new one. It is through the Arizona, I think, Department of Education.
Okay, well, I'll check that out. Thank you so much, Karen.
Yeah, Ms. Humphreys will know more.
So kind of a general comment and then kind of a question for the, I think the focus and why I was supportive of doing this social emotional is it's the idea that we're not trading off between academics, but having kids who are in the right frame of mind are much easier to educate. Because I know there's a big debate that certain school districts are focusing on all social emotional stuff and not teaching academics. And I think what we're trying to do here, and correct me if I'm wrong, is to provide those supports so we can focus on our core mission, which is educating kids on the Arizona standards. Is that, I just want to make sure we're not losing focus of our job is to get those kids through educated and hopefully healthy as well. So Dr. Guerin, if you want to comment on that.
It absolutely goes hand in hand. I'm a former classroom teacher, and when a student is in crisis or struggling or do not have what they need every day, it is so incredibly difficult to move them forward academically. So it's not one or the other. We are absolutely academic focused, but the social emotional support. And one thing that drew me to Madison was the philosophy of the whole child. And that has served Madison well for so many years. So we absolutely have high achievement, we have high expectations, but we know that we have to support the whole child for that outcome.
Yeah, I've lived this as someone who adopted a kindergartner out of foster care, and when he was in crisis, I would go to Rose Lane, and you can't put people in headlocks. And surprisingly, once he got settled and adopted, we were a little scared when we took him to MTA because it's a little stricter. And he did just fine, but it's because you get him out of that trauma, and it makes a big difference. And the school district was supportive, and so yeah, that's just my.
I would also just comment that it also affects all the other students in the learning environment. So we want all the students to be able to learn and have the same same opportunities, so.
Did we get your question answered? And if you want to hang out, I think if you guys wouldn't, if she has other questions offline, feel free to stay around and provide as much support. Ms. Spear.
I just wanted to make a follow-up comment. One of the reasons that I also support all of this is because it helps inform our students appropriate interactions and relations with one another when a student is experiencing trauma. One of the things, and the fact that somebody asked Ms. Gresham if she was eating okay after her mother died is just makes me cringe. Some of the things that were said to my child by his peers just are in total violation of our strategic plan and social emotional wellness. And so I think that by having this in place, it also helps educate those who are not in trauma how to support and be empathetic and potentially educate a very grief illiterate society. And I think that that does yeoman's work later in life. And so I wanted to say, because death is one thing that happens to everybody. Mm-hmm. And the loved ones that are left behind have to navigate. Mm-hmm. And so not to suggest that, I'm not trying to bring the vibe down, so to speak, but this really does have such important value in our schools and on our campuses. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, Mr. Holcomb.
Yeah, just a couple of things real quick. I agree with, this is, I think, hugely important. What strikes me is a word we've used, I think, effectively in Madison before is integrated. I mean, we integrated performing arts, we integrated, this is, in my mind, is part of the integrated approach to education, and I think that sums it up. One quick thing I noticed on the top was a student self-awareness. In my observation, non-professional observations too, that is one of the critical things, is being able students to be aware of their strengths or weaknesses and what's going on. And so I'm glad that that's a component. I don't know if you agree with it, but that to me is one of the most important one. And you see it because, for middle schoolers, the world ends every day. It's created and ends every day because something happens. But I think that having that self-awareness of your strength in that too is one of the most critical things.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the reasons that Arizona chose that as one of the SEL standards. Absolutely.
Yeah.
GPS signal lost.
Hold on, let me destroy my phone.
Here, Scott, I can help. I got a hammer.
Yes, okay, I'm sorry.
Why don't you ask your question? We got 5 minutes.
It's going away. It's been terminated with extreme, but just, the other thing I would like, and this is, I know, somewhat off topic, but the same things that we're talking about here, particularly after we've gone through, I think are important for staff and their teachers too. And it would be helpful, I think, to us as a board too, if we could get, maybe not this level of presentation, that too, is what we're doing, for these same types of supports for our staff. I think that's a critical thing and part of what makes it important in Madison. And then I think you did miss one thing. You didn't introduce one member of your team, an important part of your team, who's back supporting your husband right now. We want to know this because I understand this is the person who gives direction and drives us on a daily basis what goes on in your office.
Absolutely. My apologies. Members of the governing board, I would like you to meet Atticus Dolan, who is piloting our Bring Your Infant to Work program. So he is a true Madison baby.
I'm Alex.
Forgot about him.
Well, and you can get on the Madison pre-K list starting now.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you so much for informative. And when you only have 2 items on the board, you get the full grilling from the board. So
thank you very much for the
congratulations on
support.
surviving that.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Pienkowski, or actually, Dr. Gann, you want to introduce the parent survey results?
Certainly. Governing Board President, members of the board, cabinet, and guests, Ms. Marshall and her team will share the results of the 21-22 family survey. Ms. Marshall.
Thank you, Dr. Osborne, governing board members, and members of cabinet. We've talked a lot about the strategic plan tonight. That goal area 3 is community strength, certainly an asset for Madison, having that voice of the community and responding to community needs. So tonight we do want to review the end of the year survey, our annual end of the year survey results from last year. So to do that, we have Jason Pienkowski, our Director for Research and Evaluation.
President Osborne, members of the board, Dr. Guerin, cabinet, thanks for the opportunity to present tonight. Today I'll be reviewing the results of the family survey. And if we move ahead to our first slide, we've been administering this style of survey for quite some time, and we've included some longitudinal information for you to see some different response rates that we have included over the course of time. We do administer the survey in an English version as well as a Spanish version. Parents, family members opting into providing results for the survey have that option within there to select English or Spanish as they engage in the survey. As you can see over time, we've had some ups and downs as far as response rates depending on different events that were happening within the district at that time. And we did not administer this survey in 2019, 2020, so that gap is available. Typically, we do have this survey administered towards the end of April and the May month. We did push that survey back this year towards the end of the school year. Some of the reasons related to that is we did have some competing communication events happening towards the end of the school year. We did have some other competing surveys that were going out asking for family feedback. And we also knew that we were looking to transition to a survey that was more aligned with our strategic plan, that utilized some of the core contents in that strategic plan, which are aligned to the MTSS process, which some of those MTSS features were alluded to in the prior presentation. And in that transition, we knew that there was going to be a vocabulary and a terminology education that did need to happen with the community. So we opted to go with the standard one that we had been using previously, still including the questions that we track over time. And then, as you can see, the response rate, we usually track that response rate, report that out to the sites, and we opened that in May 31st and closed that on June 16th. Another point of note related to that is that during that window, we were also engaged in our school improvement sessions, and so schools at that point in time did not have an ample amount of time to dive into those parent survey results. Because they were in the midst of things, looking at their data, looking at their plans, reviewing some of their internal information, but they have engaged in looking at that at a previous ILT, Instructional Leadership Team meeting, and in subsequent future ILTs to look to see if those plans are still addressing a lot of the trends and comments that happened in that parent survey.
And to the extent possible, when we hear from the schools, I would love for them to kind of blend in some of their school-specific data.
If we move along to our next slide, one of the more prominent questions that we track over the course of time is, I feel my child is safe at school, as we know that we've seen some also patterns of peaks and valleys over the course of time with our top box answers of strongly agree and agree. From our previous survey, end of year 2021 to last year's survey 2022, we did see our K4 respondents, that would be respondents who identified themselves as having students in kindergarten through fourth grade, saw a slightly higher increase in those perceptions of strongly agree and agree from those two periods from 2021 to 2022, and our 5th and 8th grades had some slight increases over that course of the time. And you can see that more readily in the agree transition from 2021 to 2021-22. And then we saw a modest decrease in the disagrees and the strongly disagrees. On the next item that we...
So Jason?
Yes.
I guess one of the issues that I think we just kind of have to wrestle with is, prior to COVID, I think we all felt that school safety meant one thing, which is violence, and now it's measuring, I think, two concepts. Are we going to try to adapt to try to tease that out from a health and safety versus a safety perspective, or, 'cause I think that's impacting our numbers, or what your thoughts on that as the researcher?
Yes, Dr. Osborne, thanks for the question. I agree with that, and I think that was an epiphany I had during some of the prior reports, especially when you pair that with some of the open comments where it goes down some different avenues related to, maybe social emotional well-being, general physical security, and then just the processes that are happening in campus. So we do plan to open that up, align questions more with the strategic plan, so we have some internal indicators to understand the perceptions of that, and as well as make sure that's aligned to the MTSS process, which addresses academics, social and behavioral components.
Great.
And so with this question, I would recommend my child's school to another is also an important indicator that we like to track because it helps us know their perception and their willingness to share their recommendation with peers, family members, whatever that may be in this situation. And we do see that indicator is slightly more favorable as far as the strongly agreed categories. And in this situation, we also had a slightly higher increase for parents who identified as being in K4 grades from the prior year to last year than we did in grades 5 through 8. But we do see a relatively high recommendation rate with those families that engaged in the survey.
Are there any school-specific trends of certain schools are higher than others, or maybe that's something we can address at the school reports?
There are some trends that happen on different question types and in different response rates, and we can certainly work with schools to bring that information
I think
forward.
that'd be helpful information to kind of give us a full picture, unless I hear otherwise.
Another question that we look at is just general overall satisfaction with my child's academic progress. We see, nope, I skipped one. There we go, sorry about that. We see the trend over time, somewhat still flat from 2021-22 to 2021-22. We saw a slight increase with parents who identified as having students in a K-4 environment, and a relatively flatlining for parents who had identified as having students in the 5 through 8 realm. And then lastly, the all-important letter grade. I would give my child's district the following letter grade. Although we saw some flatline indicators with some of those key components that we looked at, we do see an increase in the number of families that would rate us as an A district, which is nice to know they understand some of those concerns and variables that are happening. There may be a lack of satisfaction, but would still, in sake of things, assign a higher letter grade than they would have in the previous year as a general trend. We did see a nice improvement for the K-4 environment and a modest improvement in 5 through 8. And the fun part is going through all of the open comments and processing those and trying to identify some trends and comments that came about. And as Dr. Guerin mentioned earlier, one of the items that came about that typically wasn't available related to security measures being physical protections, protocols for entries into situations, as well as just general protective devices that occur for security measures. And I think this alludes to Dr. Osborne's question before about feeling safe. That's, that perceptual safety and those physical safeties. That's not a topic that 2-3 years ago was prevalent, but what certainly did show up in this comment thread with parents. And this survey was released during a time where there was definitely several national events happening that probably helped put that focus on that tragic situation.
Dr. Osborne?
Along with those.
Mr. President?
Mr. Holcomb.
Yeah, and just for clarity on these, because these are open commonalities, but were there trends in relation to these? Was security measures, the comments positive, negative? Class, looking at academic progress, educator communication. Okay, there's a comment made, but was it positive or negative? I think is the more helpful
Yeah.
able for us to know.
Okay. For the security measures, typically it was a need that was identified. There wasn't any comments at that point that said too much security or not enough. Most of them were related to, I think this process can be improved. I think that process can be improved for the security measures. For bullying, fighting, and safety, that was also an area that was identified as an area of improvement. That parents were experiencing that and feeling that that item did need to be addressed. One item that I probably should have put up here that might add some clarification to that is there are positive comments that come through that are just generally positive comments and say, hey, good job. Thanks, I really like what you're doing, and that was a trend that did happen as well, so I probably was neglectful in putting that one in, but a lot of times those positive comments are just general, like kind of high five types of comments. And most of the time when I identify trends, a majority of them are suggestions for improvement.
So these would be comments that things that they think people either need emphasis or negative comments.
Yeah, typically. There are some that say, that do have some positive features to it, but typically these are areas of need.
And I don't think a lot of these are particularly, after-school opportunities. We know we've been struggling with that. COVID decisions, I think, that there's going to be a wide range. I do think the bullying, fighting, I think that's a trend that we're seeing in other data. So I think this kind of reinforces some of the priority areas, at least in my mind. And I don't know what the administration feels about that, and then I'll get to you.
Absolutely, and we did see some trends and some things on both sides. So some people said that the homework, there wasn't enough homework. Some people said there was too much homework. So there was some of that. There was a lot of very specific compliments. This teacher is simply amazing, helped my family tremendously. Just general, Madison is amazing, we love it here, all of that. But these are really helpful trends for us to focus on areas of growth. So thank you.
This question.
I just had a quick question. Thank you. Did any of these topics have like more comments than, did any of them stand out more than others?
I would say that the academic progress comments stood out more than others. Meaningful homework was a frequent comment that stood out more than others, and that meaningful homework alludes to the too much, not enough, Goldilocks type of situation, or parents' ability to provide support for that homework, or why is there so much and I don't understand how it's aligned to what they're doing in the. So there's a broad spectrum for the meaningful homework conversation, and it definitely followed a little bit more of a pattern at middle school, but it did kind of was somewhat pervasive throughout the K-8 environment. And then educator communication was also a common item that was pervasive throughout the various different schools as far as receiving timely communication, useful communication on different endeavors.
Ms. Spear.
I have one quick question, and it could be that I'm just really daft. Can you explain what human motivation is?
Yeah. No. Yes. For human motivation was a common thread that talked about students and adults' engagement in the learning environment, talking about students or teachers not being motivated to provide optimal learning opportunities, whether they attributed it to various different internal or external mechanisms. They didn't feel like they were challenged, or the students just didn't want to engage in classroom. Parents were aware of those different motivational situations from either conversations with students or through other means, peer groups or something along those lines.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
I have one other question, but I'll wait until after you're done.
Well, I think is a presentation.
I was going to allude on a few of those topics a little bit
Okay.
more.
Why don't you do that, and then we'll take some more questions if that works for you, Ms. Kazi. Go ahead.
Thank you. So bullying, fighting, and safety, that related to that general idea that we probably typically went for with that question of I feel safe. But in this one, parents brought that one up relatively well. That was a little bit more of a stronger comment at the middle school as far as bullying, fighting, safety. Human motivation, we just talked about. Classroom management was not the, I'd say, a middle tier frequent comment, where it talked about disruptive students in the discipline system. That would be related to PBIS types of systems and systems that happen within a school to address non-positive behaviors, or within a classroom to address those behaviors. Academic progress and expectations, that was a general run too about students maybe not making the academic progress that was expected, or expectations being too low in that period of time to help promote that academic progress for students. There were some comments about class size, and oddly enough, it happened a little bit more in elementary schools than middle schools, and typically it's the other way around. I was surprised by that one a little bit. Educator communication we talked about. There were still some COVID decisions that came about. It wasn't super frequent, but some folks still brought into question decisions that were made related to COVID. Meaningful homework, we discussed about the Goldilocks type of formula for homework. After-school opportunities, mostly in middle school, focused a little bit more on academic tutoring, and then at the elementary schools, more for like opportunities to do things before and after school, that family unit. And then some school lunch, talking about the varying quality of some items that did pop up on some item responses, and more people engaged in school lunch last year than before. So I would have anticipated maybe more of that than we would have anticipated than we have in the past. So that was actually one of the lower common comments that came about. And then progress and feedback. That was one that was probably a high top tier comment related to giving timely feedback to students, like grading, feedback on assignments, what can they do to improve, what do they need to do to master a particular topic. And so there were some concerns about that process of giving feedback to students and including the family in that decision making. And then one general trend that kind of happened from this past survey to the prior survey, that prior survey 2 years ago, couched a lot of statements saying that, you know, I know there's not academic progress, but things are happening. I know this is happening, but things are happening. That kind of went away from this current survey, and there was just some frank discussion saying this is something that we're noticing isn't happening, and we'd like it to happen. So there was a slight change of tone with those. We received about 354 comments, and that was about 25% of the people engaged in the survey provided some form of comment. And that was about it.
Before Ms. Kazi, you have a question. I'm pretty happy about, given the craziness that happened, I'm just thinking of January and February and the constant sub turnover and all that. I mean, I think the results are, you know, I think we did pretty well given some of the tail end of the, you know, dramatic impact of COVID. So, I mean, I think these are all topics that we need to focus on, and in terms of quality improvement. But I think as a general, my view is I feel slowly making progress. We're moving away from COVID, and you know, I think it shows that I think we did the best we could during the circumstances. With that, Ms. Kazi, do you have a question?
My question, as he went through the details.
Okay, Ms. Spear, you have a question?
One quick question. I know that we've always struggled with what direction to give parents to answer the survey if they have more than one student in Madison. I know that when I had my 3 children in Madison at different grades, one might be thriving and everything was peachy, and then the other might not be doing so well. And so I had to choose a student. How are we addressing that now?
Great question. Initially, we do ask a family to pick one particular student and give us a response for that. And then upon their completion of that, they receive an automated opportunity to fill out another survey for a different student if they like that. We've utilized that strategy last year, and so that is a way that we try and capture that so that they can provide another response if they do need. And I think we received maybe about 30 additional responses through that.
Thank you. That's fabulous. That's it. Really great. Thank you.
Yeah, can I follow up on that question? So the numbers that we have, does that reflect the number of surveys or the number of respondents? In other words, if a parent put in 3 surveys because they have 3 kids, is all three in that count? And just, it affects the numbers, but apparently not a great deal, because we had, you said about 30. But
We do have, we don't have the ability to track if an individual person is submitting multiple surveys. We do have some ways to be able to figure out if, one person is continuously answering over and over again. But the survey is relatively anonymous, and so we're able to look at some things, but not everything.
okay, thank you.
I don't know if this helps, but because I've done the survey many times. So,
Hopefully not.
and it does ask for grade, right? Oh, for each child. So at one point I had to do 3 in a row, but, so it asks for grade, right? It tells,
Yes.
it asks for which grade you're in and what school. So if they're at different schools or different grades, then you would have, it would be different answers, so as like Ms. Spear said.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Great, and I think we look forward to kind of having this discussion as we do the school reports. I think that'll be a nice addition to what we're looking at. All right, unless there's any other thoughts or comments, on to item 7.1, future meetings. Dr. Guerin, how are you going to spend our days?
One moment, please. Thank you, Ms. Humphries. So in looking at our future meetings, on September 13th, we will start our school reports. So at the last board meeting, we talked about time changing, extending that period of time so we can have a little bit more in-depth presentations. So we're going to start at 4 p.m. in the Madison #1 library. And then did we change that? No, we're still in the, no, we keep changing the location, so I just wanted to confirm with her. And our regular board meeting will start at 6:30. It will happen just the same on September 27th. We will have qualified evaluator training, a couple of new things, but we'll still be adding. We haven't finalized that agenda yet. And then for the September 27th, we will start our awards on Shining Star and Make a Difference. We are going to wait on the school showcases. We thought it was just too much to add to those 2 September meetings. And Madison Park did not mind at all waiting till October 11th. So that's when we will kick those off. So I think that works really well moving into those. We will have a bond update provided by Ms. Garvey along with our annual financial report on October 11th. Please mark your calendars for an all-day study session on October 17th, where we will focus on strategic planning, follow-up discussions from the school presentations, on updated safety report, and other relevant topics.
So going back to the planning for the study session, how are we going to kind of handle that for topics and issues? Or we were thinking about making that a information item or discussion item. Or what is our plan for that? Or you?
So I could send you a draft agenda before in your weekly update, and then we can make it a discussion item so we can give feedback on it if that works for the board. Does that sound good?
That makes some sense.
Okay, that way we have something to start with, and then we can provide feedback on it. We can do that on the 17th in preparation for the October study session.
The October 17th is the study session.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you meant the board retreat study session.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So when would you want us to have that discussion about the agenda, so we can set?
Probably on the
agenda?
11th, it would
Yeah.
seem to make some sense.
Or is that too
I'm
late?
losing my dates. Sorry, it's okay. The first meeting in September or the September 27th?
27th makes sense to
27th?
me.
Okay,
Yeah, and I think if you can get out the rough agenda early, and there may not need to be a whole lot, or we can do it informally and give feedback and you can synthesize. But, and I want to make sure you have enough, if there's some topics we want to discuss, I don't want you guys rushing to put together stuff,
makes sense. Okay, thank you, that's helpful.
Okay, other thoughts on the agenda? Mr. Holcomb?
Yeah, and just related to the MOU for the Madison Education Foundation, I know we want to move forward with that, but how quickly, I think the quicker we can get that in place, the better. I may have missed it. It's on here if we wanted to, and I think it helps if we give a deadline. Or trying to at least have it a placeholder on the schedule, get that done.
So Ms. Garvey and I just met, and we do have a planning meeting coming up, and we do need some legal advice with that as well. So I'm confident we'll get it done before October. Earlier would be better, but we want to make sure we get it right. Ms. Garvey?
Thank you, board members and Dr. Guerin and Cabinet. It may be October only because, or November, the Madison Education Foundation also needs to approve it in their meetings, so it's not just here. So if we finalize our work by the end of September, that would give them October.
Thank you, Ms. Garvey.
I think October is fine, and even if it really is November, but I think it's important for us to have, that placeholder to drive that forward.
Excellent. Any other thoughts, comments on the agenda? All righty. Do I have make sure I haven't missed anything? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Ms.
Second.
Kazi and Ms. Gresham with the second. The meeting is adjourned. Scott, you need some help with the phone?